Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
All right, thank you guys so much for all of your Halloween movie requests. It's really helped us this year. This time, we're going to try a request from one of our loyal listeners, Neil. He asked us for a horror comedy, more of a comedy than a horror, but we thought it would be a lot of fun to do anyway. Craig has some very special ties to this movie. It's called Once Bitten from 1985. I know that Neil posted this on our Facebook page. Craig, you immediately went pretty much apeshit over it. So you have more of a history than I do with this. I remember seeing the posters everywhere, but I know in 1985 I was a little too young for my parents to allow me to see a film with a poster such as this. It's a sex comedy. It's basically a high school sex comedy with a small horror wrapping around it.
Yeah.
How about you? When did you first see this movie? This was my first time.
Oh, gosh. I can't believe you've never seen this.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I don't know when the first time I saw it was, but I know I was young. And my sister and I used to watch this movie all the time. I've talked about my sister a lot, and she's guest hosted with us before, and she's really not a fan of horror, but she loved this movie, and she was probably the primary reason that we watched it so often. We watched this movie all the time. You know, if you look for it on IMDb or on Rotten Tomatoes or wherever, they list it as a comedy horror fantasy. Is a stretch, really. I mean, you're right. It really is more like a sex comedy. It's more like like a John Hughes sex comedy kind of thing, really. Yeah. But it's funny. When it was recommended, I thought, oh man, that sounds like a lot of fun. But I thought that we had our lineup all set up already. And then it turned out we had one slot left, and you said, let's do it. And I was really excited to do it. But I warned you going in. I'm like, Todd, it's really stupid.
Yes.
It's a really stupid movie, but it's a lot of fun. And so I probably hadn't seen it in 15 years, at least, if not more. And I remembered the plot, and I remembered key moments, but I didn't remember it that well. And I frankly didn't have really high expectations going back in. But when I sat down to watch it yesterday, I started watching it, and I got into it, and I'm like, you know what? This is stupid, but I still really like it. Like, it's funny. It's funny and cute and charming, and there's some really good stuff going on here. I don't know. What'd you think?
Well, I have to say, what I liked most about it was I knew about this movie forever, never did watch it. And now, having watched it, it's like, oh, cool, I finally get to watch a movie that as a young kid I really wanted to see but didn't or couldn't. And it's like being a young kid in the 80s, because this movie, and we've talked about this before, like, oh, this movie's a time capsule. No, this movie's a freaking time capsule of movies. I don't think we have ever reviewed a movie that is so dripping with 1980s frame by frame as this movie is. The hairstyles, the clothing, the locations, everything about it. It's 100% 80s. It's pinks and neons and purples and whites everywhere, and like pink shirts and white sports jackets over them. I mean, this whole movie, I don't know if I've seen a movie more 1980s than this one. I mean, seriously, that was the thing that kept me propelled through this whole thing. I was like, certainly this is going to drop off at some point, and it totally didn't. And then, it even goes to like the kind of humor that we were into at the time. Of course, these sex comedies were really popular at the time, and then even got a little cringy at moments. And I was like, yeah, that's how we kind of were back then, right? So there's some things in this movie that are so the movie's extremely dated, 100%. But then there's some things in this movie that are really dated and really would not, you'd never see again.
No, yeah, and I know what you're talking about, some of the specific things, and we'll get to it in talking about the plot. But honestly, I don't know if it's just because I am a kid of the 80s or what. Like, even the cringy stuff, like I was laughing hysterically. Like I shouldn't be laughing at this. Like it's not okay to laugh about this stuff anymore. Like, oh no, that's not funny. You shouldn't do that. No, it's still hilarious. I'm sorry.
You don't care.
Like, right. I'm just gonna put my PC bullshit aside and like it's really funny. Even the cringy stuff, like because the characters, and that's another thing that I like about this movie, like the characters are so likable and it's not mean-spirited in any way.
No.
I didn't think. Like
No.
even in those non-PC moments, I didn't feel like it was mean-spirited. It was just, it was a different time, and comedy was different then. And yes, I'm, in many ways, I'm glad that we've gotten a little bit more politically correct and that we don't poke fun at certain things the way that people used to. But even back in the day, what made some of those things offensive was because they were mean-spirited, they were hateful. And this movie isn't hateful. It's just goofy and playful, and I don't know, I enjoyed it.
Well, and all of that aside, all of that stuff we're talking about here aside, it's pretty dumb. Like the humor in here, it gets really, really dumb. And when I say dated, I don't just mean like non-PC stuff, but some of the humor is like, oh God, I've heard that joke like 1,000 times before. And it's not like it originated with this movie either. It's funny because I went back and I went to look at some contemporary reviews of this movie. And I found the Washington Post, a woman named Rita Kempley, on November 15th of 1985 reviewed this movie. She was not kind to it in 1985. And I don't think most people were. I think the movie did quite well among audiences, but among critics, they just thought it was terrible.
Yeah.
What this woman said. So there's a line in this movie that a guy does. One of the ongoing gags is that the vampire, who's a woman, who kind of this film centers around, has a butler assistant who is a man, and he's flamboyantly gay. And he's actually played by Cleveland Little, who we know from Blazing Saddles, right? He was the lead in Blazing Saddles. But he's got so many groaner one-liners, and he's so over the top with his performance that you just can't help but laugh. One of the jokes is that every time she summons him, he happens to be in her closet. Like... like he's trying on different elements of her clothing. Like every time he comes out, he's got something different of hers on. The first time this happens, she says,
"Okay, Sebastian, out of the closet."
I came out of the closet centuries ago.
Which is so stupid. And she points this out in her review as one of the movie's many dated inanities. And in parentheses, she writes, "The writers still think 'What's your sign?' is a good joke." Now, okay, let me just point out that even in 1985, a lot of the humor in this movie was considered dated. That's how dated the movie is. But you're right. It has a certain charm to it, and you can still laugh at it, even if you're groaning at the same time.
Yeah. As a gay man, I am not offended by that portrayal.
It's too stupid to be offensive, really. I mean, it's just too dumb.
Well, it is, and it's super over the top, but we gays are fans of the flair, like there are gays. There are gays
Do go on
out there. Like
tell me more about the gays, Craig.
He likes trying on her fancy clothes. I get it. I mean, it's not my kink, but whatever. Good for him. And he is who he is. He's not ashamed of it. And he's her friend. And the Countess, this woman that we're talking about, is Lauren Hutton, for Pete's sake.
Crazy,
My
right?
God. Lauren Hutton is a superstar, in her own right. And she looks fantastic in this movie. And, I totally bought their fag and hag relationship. Like it was it was cute. I thought it was cute. I wasn't offended at all. Anyway,
Before we move on, I have to point out another line from this woman's review that said, Hutton, whose emotive range is second only to Ally McGraw's, is hardly an 18-year-old's dream come true. Her, quote, big, luscious magoombas.
Did you undress her slowly? Like first bearing her big, luscious magoombas?
As they are affectionately called, are hardly magoomba-like.
Okay, fine, fair enough. She doesn't have a huge rack. That's
No.
fine. But I was talking to my partner last night, and I'm like, she is smoking hot
Yeah,
in this movie.
she really is.
I have no idea how old she was. I would guess 40s, maybe. But she looks amazing. Like, her body is just banging. Yeah, you can see her age a little bit in her face, but not an 18-year-old guy's fantasy. Lies.
Yeah.
That is a straight up lie. Like any hot-blooded American young man would be
True.
I'm not trying to get too graphic here, but would be excited by this woman's body. She's just gorgeous.
They'd want to, yeah, those big, luscious magoombas. Those small magoombas, whatever. Yeah, no. And then Karen Coppins, right, is in this, and she wasn't huge. She had some parts in some movies, just a very short span of time in the 80s. She did a bit.
And she did a lot of TV.
Yeah, quite a bit of TV. A lot of just one-off parts on TV. Did a little bit on Dallas for a little while.
She was in True Beverly Hills.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And it was funny because I read that when they screened this for test audiences, the test audiences liked her so much that they decided to really quick redesign the posters and the box art to include her in it. She initially wasn't in that advertising stuff, but audiences liked her so much in this that they decided to put her in. And she's very good. She's charming. She's a little bit too sweet in some ways. Like, gosh, I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but basically her boyfriend, played by Jim frickin' Carrey.
Jim Carrey.
In his first big movie role, basically cheats on her, and she gets like mad, but like not super mad, and then she forgives him way too easily. Like, so she's a little dewy-eyed and naive, but she's cute. It's a good ensemble. There's just a lot going for it. It's a cute, fun movie.
Yeah, that's true. It's really cool to see this super freaking young Jim Carrey. I mean, who's what, in his early 20s here?
He looks like a baby.
Playing a teenager and doing a pretty good job of it, actually. I mean, he was quite good in this film, I thought.
Yeah. Jim Carrey is not my favorite actor, but the thing that bothers me about Jim Carrey is when he's so frantic. You know, like the whole Ace Ventura thing, like it's just too much for me. Like, calm down, like take a Ritalin and go sit in a corner or something. But when he does more serious roles or more subdued roles, I think he actually is quite a good actor.
He is. Yeah. I mean, The Truman Show, fantastic.
Yeah, The Truman, great, fantastic. And there's a little bit of Jim Carrey over the top stuff here, a little bit, but it's not so much that it bothered me. He's just kind of, and maybe it has something to do with his age. You know, he's supposed to be a teenage boy. Teenage boys are goofy and awkward and stupid, so it works here for me. But yeah, I mean, God, talk about time capsule. Gosh, you know, he's a huge superstar, and here he is, you know, in his first big role. And
yeah,
I knew him when.
My first introduction to Jim Carrey was in Living Color. He was a bit of a different guy by the time that came around, but not much older than this, quite honestly. Yeah, I didn't get to see him in Once Bitten until recently, but it was nice. It was fun to see this guy, and I was just maybe every time he was on the screen, I was just marveling at how fresh-faced he was. It was just crazy. The movie starts out with just kind of establishing the fact that there's this woman who lives in this mansion above the Hollywood Hills, and that is the woman played by Lauren Hutton, and she is just referred to as Countess.
I just wanted to say that it opens up with that shot of the huge mansion and this score. I loved the music in this movie throughout, but just even the original score that plays when we're introduced to this mansion and you see Sebastian, the gay butler, walking around being super gay, and it's all set against this great score, and the music throughout is so good. But yes, you're right. This is when we're introduced to the Countess.
It's good if you like 80s pop rock. I mean, that's... Yeah, that's, I mean, and I do. And you do too. So, I mean, again, that's how this movie is such a time capsule. And there's some songs that were clearly written for this film. You know, I expected Great White's Once Bitten, Twice Shy to be somewhere in here, but no, it's a totally different Once Bitten song that comes up. So,
and it's fantastic.
Yeah. It sure is.
I love it.
But, you know, he comes through and he pours what looks like a Bloody Mary. Of course, you know, it's actually blood. And comes upstairs, and the Countess is in her coffin. And one thing I also love about this, again, it's so 80s, but remember when we thought that people who lived in big mansions, who were like in these modern homes, everything was freaking white? Like white floors, white ceiling, white walls. Modern was like very stripped down, big. I mean, it's just so weird looking back at it. Like nobody would want their home like that. But that's the kind of home that we spend a lot of time in, this Countess's mansion, and she lives in her coffin upstairs. And as soon as she opens her coffin, she starts talking about how she needs a virgin male's blood before Halloween comes, basically. Oh, by the way, happy Halloween, everybody. You know, Halloween's coming up. This is a Halloween movie, which is why we're doing it.
It's very Halloween-y, and I like that about it.
Yeah.
But the other thing about, okay, so you're right. So she needs virgin's blood. But there are just so many great lines in this movie, too. Sebastian, I think, says, virgin blood isn't easy to come by these days. And then she says, being a vampire in the 20th century is a nightmare. Like, it's so funny. And there are so many references to how, like, kids these days, young men these days aren't virgins, and she has to drink the blood of a virgin man 3 times before Halloween, and she has like this whole troop of vampires that like, I don't know, scout for her or whatever. Some of them come in and she talks to them, and one of them says,
"Cool, the closest we've come so far is an 11-year-old.
Oh, don't be disgusting."
Yeah. Oh.
It's just so funny.
Yeah, and then things like that are peppered with these groaners. Like after she's complaining, he looks at her and goes,
"Did we get up on the wrong side of the coffin this evening?"
It is a groaner, but
There's
coming
so
from
much
him
action.
and with that delivery, with that totally flamboyant delivery, it's so petty, and it's real life.
Okay. I'll take your word for that, I guess. But I love how while she's getting the report from these other vampires, how she's totally in her workout get up and on a bike, like working out.
Yeah, there's workout equipment
That
everywhere.
was such a thing in the 80s. Jane Fonda's workout, this whole workout thing, headbands, knee highs, like every fad. Everything you could possibly think of that was popular or faddish at one point in the 80s shows up in this movie at some point. It's like in the perfect spot for all of that. I absolutely loved it. So anyway, so she's got this thing going on. In the meantime, Jim Carrey, whose character's name is Mark, is trying to make out with his girlfriend, Robin, who is played by Karen Hoppins, like we said before, in his ice cream truck.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the, at first I'm like it's like an oil field.
I don't know what it is. I guess so.
There's like an oil pump
it's obviously
going in
like the
background.
makeout spot.
Yeah, it's the makeout. Well, we don't know that at first. He's trying to make out with her, and she's like, "Oh, I'm just not ready yet. It's got to be special. It's got to be right," and all that. So we know where this is going. But I thought the scene was so clever because after he's like, "This is clearly not going to happen." He glances out the window and he sees this guy totally boning this chick next to him in a convertible with the top down. And then I notice again in the background the oil pump going, and I'm like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
this is funny. And then he gets frustrated. He steps out of the car and looks up at the sky. And as he's looking up at the sky, the camera pans out, just completely pans out to the sky. He's looking up like, why? And all of the cars surrounding this ice cream truck are all bouncing.
Yeah.
And the oil thing is going.
That's the raciest part of the movie. Like, I was
Yeah.
actually kind of surprised by how racy it was.
Yeah.
The first guy that you talked about.
He's got a bare ass.
Yeah, and whoever is underneath him is a lucky guy or gal because he's like
Going at it.
like, well, like he's like thrusting up and down like 2 feet in the air, like whoa.
I like the person in the other car whose legs are just straight out the window.
Yeah.
Like straight out and up and spread. Like there's nothing between those because all of those legs are completely out of the window. It's such a stage scene, but it's so funny. That was my favorite scene in the entire movie. Was that bit right
I'm not
there?
surprised.
Yeah. Oil pump going in the background. Oh, it's so lowbrow. But yeah, I'm kind of surprised this movie. I don't know. Like it's PG-13. I feel like if it were released today, it would be maybe more R with some of this stuff. In
Maybe. I think just that scene. Everything else is pretty tame.
I don't know, but toward the end, when they're strapping him down and spreading his legs, and
Well, yeah, but there's no nudity. Like that's the other thing. Like nothing really happens that would warrant an R. There's one F-bomb dropped, which is allowed for PG-13 so long as it's only one. It's this, blatant sexual innuendo that's going on here. That's the only thing that I would think would even give anybody pause. Other than that, it's very innocent. Nobody dies in the whole movie.
Oh, it's true.
Including the vampires. Nobody gets killed. There's very little blood, and the blood that is there is really just more suggestive than anything. It doesn't even really look like real blood. It's really very tame, I would say. But yes, this scene, pretty racy. But then we jump to, okay, so Mark the next day is talking to his 2 friends, Jamie and Russ, who work at like a burger stand. And he's talking about his frustrations or whatever. And Jamie and Russ are like the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, they are so cute. Like they're just kind of these semi-dorky, but also at the same time adorable guys. They're the way that we envisioned kind of teenage nerds at the time. Not the super stereotypical like suspenders and pocket protectors and horn-rimmed glasses, but I don't know, these skinny, big-eyed guys. Russ is a redhead and Jamie is a brunette. That's the only distinguishing thing about them. But I think Jamie says there's too much pressure about getting laid. It's like taking a driver's test for manhood. Like it's so funny. And so they decide, in terribly flawed logic, Mark says,
sometimes I think I should just go out, find some strange woman and get laid. Then I could go back to Robin without all this pressure between us.
and they're like, yeah, okay. So they decide to go into Hollywood. I guess they live in the suburbs, but they're going to go into Hollywood to try to get laid. And so they do. And this drive, there's a whole montage of them driving into Hollywood set against the title track, Once Bitten, which again is fantastic. But it is hilarious. Like, There's a lady shooting a music video, like rolling around on a car. There's like punk rockers. There's a fancy dressed lady walking a lion on a leash. Like, it's the most ridiculous, stereotypical view of Hollywood. And just these three big-eyed losers in their ice cream truck driving around, looking around. And it is so funny.
And there's a star filter on the camera so that every light that shows up has like a sparkle on it as it's going through it. Oh, it's so 80s. It's just wonderful. And then they end up at this club, which I would love to go to. It's the Phone a Date Club. Like, seriously, I think this place is awesome. You go in and you sit at a table, and every table is numbered, and it has a phone on it. And it's got, once again, everything is 80s. It's got one of those phones that are shaped like lips. Yeah. It's so great. And you're supposed to look over at a table and you could dial them up and you could talk to them and then, go over and chat with them more if they invite you over. What a great friggin' concept. I love it.
It is pretty hilarious.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of want to, I really hope a place like this really existed because, like I said, I would have been there every night. This appeals to Todd in so many ways. It's just the way I roll. So anyway, enough about me. So they sit down at the table and they're scoping out chicks. And at the same time, the vampire lackeys have noticed this ice cream truck going through. And of course, they realize all of these guys have to be complete virgins. And so they track them to the club, and he ends up, Jim Carrey's character, Mark, ends up meeting up with the Countess at the bar. And there's a bar fight and a bunch of jokes and all that, but they sneak out the back, and he ends up at her house. And at her house, she does a whole seduction routine, and he does the whole typical 80s virgin thing where it's like suddenly he's there and he doesn't even know why he's there. He wanted it so bad. I love the bit where she leaves for a moment to get something, and he's looking at this giant portrait on the wall where she's completely naked, and he starts touching the breast on the portrait. What is that?
And she catches him doing it. It's so funny.
What? Oh God.
But and then she seduces him. And listen, I understand that he's a kid, but like this seduction scene, like she is, I swear to God, so hot. And she's kissing him a little bit, and then her thing is she bites the buttons off of his shirt. She'll bite off a button and then spit it like across the room. And then she does that going all the way down, and she goes all the way down, like she goes out of frame, and you see her messing with his belt, and you hear the zipper going down, and you see him standing up enough that his pants can come down, but he's so nervous, and he's just like nervously chattering, and meanwhile we the audience are like, oh my God, what is going on down there? And listen, not to get too personal, but I remember the first time something like that happened. Like, you are super excited, but like it's the first time, and you're like, hello.
What am I supposed to do?
Am I supposed to keep talking to you? What's going on?
Hey, I still ask these questions, Craig. I'm not even sure what the etiquette is on this. And I've been married for almost 20 years.
Oh man, but it's adorable. And then so like she's down there, you don't know what's going on, but then he just goes ow, and then it cuts away
to a dream sequence, right? Is that his dream sequence?
I don't think the dream sequence is yet.
Oh, okay. I can't wait to get to the.
Sebastian goes to the vampire dorms because there's a big room full of like bunch of different coffins that are like reflective of the time period that these vampires were turned or whatever. And it's actually very cute. And he tells them all to go to bed. And then as he's walking out and turns off the light, they're all like, "Good day, Sebastian. Good day, Sebastian."
My biggest disappointment with this movie is we didn't get to spend more time with these other vampires. They really had a nice setup there with these different vampires from these different eras, and even in that 2-minute scene, you could tell they all had these very distinct personalities, and then we really don't see them much again.
No, I mean, they're basically just henchmen.
Yeah.
They chase people.
Well, they're
and
the
stuff.
previous victims of hers, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It made me wonder why there were girl ones. Like, is she sometimes into girls? I don't know.
Maybe.
But some of them are girls. I don't know. But anyway, she talks to Sebastian and he's like, "Did you get the transfusion?" And she says, "Of course I did." And he's like, "Are you sure he's a virgin?" And she says, "I haven't had anything this pure since the Vienna Boys Choir hit town." I just love these one-liners. They just keep coming and it kills me. Oh, I thought they were so funny.
Funny but bad. Come on. It's how many Vienna Boys Choir jokes can we see in a movie?
Just one in this one, but it made me laugh.
Yeah.
But then she and Sebastian walk back into the living room, and Mark is all curled up on the couch with his pants down around his legs, and she wakes him up, and he doesn't remember anything that happened. And he's like, "Well, did we have a good time?" And she's like, "Oh yeah," or whatever. Like, he thinks they had sex. As it turns out, they didn't, because they can't, because he has to be a virgin.
Yeah.
But he thinks that they did. And when he goes to leave, she says, "I'll see you again soon, right?" And he confesses that he has a girlfriend. And she's like, "Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, I've been the other woman many times." What a great line.
And so he gives them each an ice cream bar. And then he leaves, and they throw them over their shoulders.
He's such a dork.
It's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's great. He's endearing in that way, right? So, and then
he's cute. He's cute in this movie. He's very cute.
And then it just kind of becomes a lot of, he's bragging to his buddies about it, and then his girlfriend overhears, and they have a whole conversation, and she's way too forgiving of this. And I love her. What is her line? It's something, and I'm going to put the clip in.
They all saw you bite her. They all saw her bite your buttons. She's because he's trying to tell the story, and he's like, "I don't know. It was the Countess, and then she had this chauffeur, but he was also the butler." And she's like, "So they all saw her bite your buttons?" Like, she's very upset about this biting the buttons thing.
I can't believe you're willing to throw away our relationship on a one-night stand with a chauffeur and a butler and a slut who eats buttons.
But she is far too forgiving. I mean, I think that's kind of, it's a lighthearted comedy, so we don't need, serious drama. But they both handle this so lightheartedly. He's like, "Yeah, well, I'm a teenage guy. That's what we do. We do stupid things, and then you get mad, but you forgive me." And she is mad, but like not mad enough.
Yeah.
And she's like, "I really do want to do it. I just want to make sure it's the right time." It's silly.
Maddening.
So they break up for a second, and then there's goofy stuff where like he's, I guess, kind of changing, like he's wearing sunglasses, and there's a gag where he's like dissecting a frog in a class, and it turns out he's not even in that class, and he's sleeping in the trunk at the foot of his bed, and his parents are concerned.
He's eating raw meat, and he's like drinking a cup of blood that his mother poured off of the raw meat before she cooked it, by mistake, and the parents are looking at it agape. I mean, it's really stupid, but it's fun, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a light teen comedy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are these dream sequences, like there are two of them. In the first one, and the dream sequences are so low budget, and I I feel like they did it on purpose. Like, I feel like they made the dream sequences super low budget on purpose. But like, it's just like a fog machine and like a blank set. And in the first one, like Sebastian is playing the accordion, and I'm pretty sure he was on roller skates because he just keeps like gliding back and forth behind them. And, you know, like she plays footsie with him, and then they kiss. But then he sees blood running down her chin after they kiss, and he wakes up and he's freaked out. And then that's all that happens before he and Robin make up. Like, they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
We're fine.
There's a nice lighthearted bit where he visits her at work.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
I love that bit. Again, total 80s shopping mall, like clothing store that she works in. Oh, my gosh. And he goes in and goofs around, and he's going to try on some pants, but they're black. And she's like, you're black? He's like, yeah, I'll go in. And when he goes into the dressing room, the Countess is in there, and she appears to him. And so there's this funny gag where he's talking to her, but then his girlfriend thinks he's talking to her, and he's telling her to get away, and she's like, fine, I will get away, and all this stuff. And finally, she bites him again, I think, in the dressing room, right? And he falls down, and she picks him up. Oh, God, are you okay? Should we take you to the hospital? Has this ever happened before? And walks out. It's goofy.
In talking about it, we can't do that scene justice.
No.
I thought that scene was hilarious. And it was so funny with the timing and the fact that, you know, the Countess is in the dressing room and Robin is outside, and he's trying to get the Countess to shut up, and Robin thinks he's talking to her. And oh God, it's so funny. And like, the Countess is obviously so irritated with Robin, but she does get her bite, and then she walks out and she's talking to Sebastian, and he asks how it went, and she says something about Robin, and she says she's young, she's sweet, and she's pissing me off. And then my favorite thing is, like, the Countess's gag is every time she exits a room, she throws somebody to the ground.
Yeah, she pushes someone over.
Just on her way out, she just shoves somebody violently to the ground.
It's always some random bystander.
Yeah.
Nobody important. And this all leads up to the pre-Halloween hop, mind you. Once again, dated for even 1985 to call a dance at your school a hop. But anyway, it's the pre-Halloween hop, and they all go, and the gag here is that he's now pretty pale, and he's wearing sunglasses, and he's slicking back his hair, and it's black and everything, and everybody's saying that he's dressed up as a vampire, and he's like, I'm not even wearing a costume, I didn't have time for it. And then who else shows up at the dance but the Countess? And right there on the dance floor, she does the whole tap on the shoulder, butt in, and then we get the crazy, awesome dance-off sequence.
It is amazing.
It's really good.
I was dying laughing out loud. Now, like, that is the thing that I remember most about this movie, was that there's this dance number, this fully choreographed dance number.
It's good.
It's not bad at all. And surprisingly enough, Jim Carrey is not a bad dancer.
No.
It's great. Like, it starts out, like you said, with the Countess, like, kind of tapping Robin's shoulder and getting her out of the way or whatever, and then she's dancing with him, and she's got him like in her thrall or whatever, and so they dance, but then Robin comes in, and the name of the song is Hands Off.
Yeah,
it's a great song. Play it, please. Hands off. Like, it's this whole back and forth thing where the two women are pulling him back and forth, and when either one of them is trying to pull him to them, like, he's going with both of them, whoever's pulling at him at the time. Eventually, like, he gets kind of thrown out of the way, and the women have kind of like a cat fight dance, and then all three of them dance together. It is, and it's the whole song. The full length of this Hands Off song, they are doing this choreographed dance, and oh, it's fantastic. fantastic. It's so good.
Yeah, actually, I have to backtrack what I said earlier about the makeout point. I think this was my favorite scene in the movie for sure. It was a good dance sequence. As silly as it was really, really well done. And that ends up, it's the battle for Mark. Robin wins. So that Countess goes off in a huff.
She tears her clothes off.
Yeah, right.
Like she's dressed in this totally wholesome, like they were supposed to be Jack and Jill, but he didn't get his costume. So she's just Jill alone and like this totally, innocent, sweet thing. But in the course of the dance, she rips her clothes off and she's got like a skimpy dance leotard on underneath a lacy like under skirt or something.
Convenient.
And, it is convenient and it's great. And then the Countess stomps away and throws somebody else to the ground on her way out. And she's mad because it's almost Halloween and she hasn't gotten her third drink yet and she has to have the third one.
Yeah, and it's apparently got to be down there by his thigh, which we're going to learn about in a second because
research.
Yeah, research time. Mark confides in his girlfriend that he thinks something's wrong, and he actually says, I think I've been bitten by a vampire. And she says, are you crazy? And there's some moments where his reflection doesn't appear in the mirror, but then it does again. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she goes to the local bookseller, and just like those research scenes in every movie we've seen, you ask him about a very specific topic like vampirism, and suddenly this guy is the world's biggest expert on vampires. And he has the worst accent. What is it? Is it like supposed to be
I have no
Indian
idea
or something?
I don't know.
This white guy is doing like an Indian accent. I have no idea. Anyway, what he tells her, and he pulls a book off the shelf, is this whole deal about a vampire female. She's like, could there be female vampires? And he was like, oh, yes, there could be. And then he explains that actually...
There can even be cat and dog vampires. My favorite thing that he says, though, she's like, well, would a female vampire, could she bite a young man?
Like 18?
Oh, I seriously doubt it. You see, the female vampire needs the blood of a virgin. And an 18-year-old boy would hardly be a virgin now, would he?
Greg raises his hand. I just thought that was such a funny line.
That's
anyway,
hilarious.
Go ahead.
No, he pulls a book off the shelf, and it has a diagram in there that shows that where she would bite him would be in the inner thigh, right near the crotch, because that would be where a virgin male's blood is most concentrated or something, which is pretty funny also. And so she goes to his friends and says, can you check for me and see if he has these bite marks on his inner thigh? And they're like, okay.
No, at first they're hesitant, but she's like, I thought he was your friend. If you really cared about him, you would do this. I liked that because it is rooted in their friendship that they agree to do this. And so, after gym or whatever, they all go to the showers and everybody is butt-ass naked in this scene. But they do interesting things with gosh, I don't even know how to describe it, but like they shoot from behind stuff so that all of the good parts are covered up, but just the good parts. You can tell that they're totally nude. And it's just hilarious. It's so slapstick and funny. Like they're kind of trying to be discreet, but they're totally not discreet, trying to check him out.
Dropping the soap and bending over to pick it up near his legs and all this stuff.
Yeah. And eventually Russ just grabs him from behind and holds him and kind of picks him up and says, look, Jamie, look. And of course, Jamie, who's the doofiest one, has all soap in his eyes and can't see anything, but he still drops down between his legs anyway. And that's where you get the other guys.
Bags in the shower! Bags in the shower!
Yeah. And all of the other guys go running out. And, it should be offensive, I guess. I don't know. I'm sure that I have friends that would find this offensive. I didn't. I just thought it was hilarious. I thought it was innocent and silly. and it was the 80s, and it was different. I'm not saying it was better, and I'm not saying I want to go back to that time, but it was a different time, and it was really funny. And then the next part is those two guys back in their burger joint, and Jamie is chopping onions, like crying, like it's the worst thing that could have ever happened to us. Everybody thinks we're homos.
That's right. And then there's a little bit of self-doubt there too, because as Jim Carrey comes in, he basically says to them, you know, guys, if you wanted to know, you just could have asked. And then
Jamie goes,
oh my God.
She told us to look.
I knew it. We enjoyed it.
Jamie, would you shut up? Just shut up.
No, that's it. We're homos. We're Rump Rangers.
No.
It's so stupid,
so
though.
funny.
Oh God, man.
It's totally stupid, but really funny. But while they're there talking about that, Mark sees Robin get into the Countess's limo with Sebastian, and she gets driven away. And so the three boys all head off to the mansion, which really leads to the final showdown.
Yeah, they break into the mansion and they go exploring, trying to find her. They find her tied up to a chair. They release her from the chair. And
tied up with her legs crossed.
Yeah.
Wasn't that so funny? Didn't you think that was hilarious?
I didn't quite catch that part.
Like her legs are crossed, knee over knee, and that's how they tied her up. I know that was very funny. Anyway,
I guess so. Yeah, you're right. And then they catch them all, and this is the final scene. Is she's going to get her third drink in, and they're going to make a big ritual out of it. Now all the other vampires are in tuxedos, and they're in this fancy room, and they're surrounded by candles and torches. And they have this dastardly-looking chair,
stirrups,
basically, that she straps him down to spread his legs so that she can yank his pants down and start to bite. And at that moment, Robin breaks free and runs forward and puts a halt to it and picks up. At first she's holding out a cross, and they're like, sorry, this doesn't work in real life. It's only in the movies.
I'm an atheist.
But then one of them picks up a torch, and this little fire on the end of this torch is enough to fend these vampires off, enough for them to escape. And I'm thinking, man, if this little bit, which amounts to like a large candle on the end of a stick, is enough to get these vampires freaking out, why did they surround their entire room with these things?
Right.
How did they even light those things, really?
There are little funny things here that I totally didn't even understand when I was a kid. Like Russ pokes one of those torches at Sebastian and says, "How would you like me to set your pubic hair on fire?" or something like that. And Sebastian goes, "Ooh, rough trade." I don't know if you know what that means, but our gay friends will.
All right. It's a little inside joke for some of our listeners.
So funny. And I love it when they start to run away. Like, Mark is kind of in the Countess's thrall. Like, she kind of has him, hypnotized or whatever. But Robin gets him away, and she says,
Mark doesn't want you because you're mean and evil. He wants me because I'm nice and sweet and pure. So f*** off.
It's good. It's good.
It's so funny.
It's also stupid. Come on, Craig. This is all really dumb.
Well, fine. I don't care. I don't care if it is dumb. I was cracking up. I thought it was hilarious.
I just got to put that.
I mean, think about all those other 80s movies that we watched.
They're all stupid.
I mean, even the non-horror, like 16 Candles, and
it was bad too. Yeah.
The humor was goofy and silly, but it doesn't make it not funny. It was still hilarious.
Right.
There's a chase scene all around the mansion with the different vampires jumping out and hissing at them and scaring them, and it
gets very thriller here because the vampires are coming at them very improbably, like by breaking through like brick walls and coming up through concrete floors and stuff.
Right.
Yeah, but it's interesting.
Russ and Jamie finally get lucky with a couple of the female vampires.
What are they thinking? What are they thinking?
They're probably not very much. There's probably not a lot of blood going to their brain at that
at
moment.
that moment.
But it's a long chase scene. I didn't find. I mean, it goes on for a long time. I didn't find it boring, but it goes on for quite a long time. And it ends up back in the vampire dorm. The Count's like, we've been all around. Where could they be? And then they notice that the coffin, the deluxe coffin that was meant for Mark once he had been changed, is rocking. And she opens it up and Robin sits up and goes, "You're too late." And she goes, "You couldn't have. You've been in there for less than a minute." And then Mark pops up smoking his cigarette. And the Countess goes, "You could have. But you didn't have time to enjoy it." That's so funny. And then the clock strikes midnight and the Countess transforms, and she, with bad, lighting, special effects, but whatever. Yeah. And she turns into like an old dowager woman who seems, kind of confused, and she's like, "I'll never find another virgin. Never."
And he's like, "That's okay. There are plenty of places like Kansas and Iowa." Yeah. They really are in the wrong part of the country for this, for sure.
Yeah.
That's the joke.
And
anyway.
all the other vampires leave, and Mark's like, she probably has a point. It'd probably be better if we could go slower. And so they just lay back down in the coffin and close the lid. And that's the end of the movie.
Oh boy.
I honest to God expected to think that it was really stupid. I remembered liking it a lot when I was a kid, but I thought, I know, even thinking back, as much as I liked it, I know it's dumb. And it is dumb. But I wasn't bored for a second. I was laughing out loud at certain points. It's in absolutely no way scary in any way. It's a comedy, but it's funny. And you and I love 80s movies, and this is just about as 80s as you can possibly get.
There's nothing
and
more
I
80s.
just I had a blast. I had a blast watching it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it was really Halloween-y. It felt like a real Halloween movie, and I love that.
Yeah, it was good. It was a real Halloween movie. You and I love 80s stuff, and this is definitely the most 80s movie we've ever seen. I don't know how you're going to get more 80s than this one, quite honestly. Got an all-star cast, competently made, not competently written, in my opinion. I mean, I'm going to have to, I understand. It's just not my cup of tea. This kind of humor is too goofball, too sophomoric, and too dated for me to really do anything more than groan at. But I can appreciate that, maybe at the time, or 10 years before this came out, people would have really thought this stuff was laugh out loud funny. Or apparently Craig feels that this is laugh out loud funny.
Oh god, yeah. Sophomore comedy, bring it.
Okay,
I'm ready. Yeah. Reading the trivia about it, they really, really wanted Michael J. Fox for the role of Mark, but at the time, the producers didn't feel that Michael J. Fox could pull off a feature-length film. Jokes on them. And the part of the Countess was written for Cassandra Peterson, Elvira.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been amazing.
I love her so much, but it would have been a completely different movie.
That's true.
And maybe that's okay. Maybe it would have been even better. I don't know, because she's hilarious. But I liked Lauren Hutton in the movie. They also offered it to Morgan Fairchild and Kathleen Turner before they offered it to Lauren Hutton. But I like the way that the casting turned out. And, it, I guess, in some way, kickstarted Jim Carrey's career to some degree.
Yeah, for sure. He's good in this. He's got a solid performance.
Yeah. It's certainly not going to be for everybody. And fans of the show, if you are hardcore horror fans, this is not the movie that you're looking for.
No.
This is a comedy.
Yeah.
And it's a silly goofball comedy. But if you're into that, I think it's fun and it's worth checking out.
Well, we had to do it because it's Halloween. And also Neil requested it, and Craig really, really wanted to do it. So thank you so much, Neil, for your request, and happy soon-to-be Halloween, everybody. And we thank you so much for the requests you've been sending our way and suggestions for Halloween movies. We're creating a list so that next Halloween we'll be able to put some of your requests on there. And maybe some of them we'll get to a little sooner. We'll see. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with a friend. Look us up online, Two Guys and a Chainsaw. Also at twoguys.red40net.com. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With Two Guys and a Chainsaw.